In 1979, the state of California proposed a law requiring children to wear helmets while riding bicycles. The bill was defeated. The argument that killed it:
we cannot stand by while preventable tragedies occur on our streets. This bill is about protecting our most vulnerable.
Used by actual legislators on the record, was that children needed to learn how to fall. That was the official position of the American government on children, on falling. And if that sentence feels insane to you right now, if that sounds like a different planet rather than 50 years ago, then you need to see what the rest of childhood looked like in the 1970s. Because the helmet vote was not the most dangerous part. Not even close. Before we get into the specifics, you need to understand the operating philosophy. 1970s American parents were not negligent. They were not careless. They were not indifferent to their children's survival. They simply believed, with complete conviction, that children who were never allowed to fail would never learn to succeed. That a scraped knee was not a crisis. That boredom was not an emergency. That the primary job of childhood was to figure things out, preferably outside, preferably without adult supervision, and preferably before dinner. This was not a fringe position. This was the mainstream consensus of an entire generation of American parents who had themselves been raised this way.
Okay, fine. One more round.
And who had survived.
Yeah, that's fair.
And who saw no reason to change a system that had been working since approximately the invention of the suburb. The result was a generation of American children who spent their days in a state of almost total operational independence. And the result of that was something that is very hard to describe to anyone who did not experience it. It felt like freedom. Real freedom. Not the scheduled, supervised, adult-mediated version of freedom that childhood occasionally allows today, but the wide-open, anything could happen, you are genuinely on your own kind of freedom that changes the way a person thinks about the world for the rest of their life. Here is a number that will reframe everything that follows. In 1972, the Consumer Product Safety Commission studied playground equipment across the United States. They found that the average American playground contained equipment capable of causing what the report called serious injury or death in approximately 1 in 3 cases. 1 in 3 pieces of equipment, nationwide. The government's response was not to remove the equipment. It was to publish a pamphlet. That pamphlet was distributed to schools. Some schools may have read it. The merry-go-round stayed. Here is how a 1970s summer morning worked. You woke up. You ate whatever was in the kitchen, usually cereal, usually without anyone supervising the process. And then you went outside. Not to a scheduled activity, not to a play date confirmed by texts between parents. Outside, as in the outdoors, the neighborhood, the general concept of away from here. Your mother's send-off was not a safety briefing. It was a screen door closing behind you, and the implicit understanding that you would reappear at some point before dark. Where did you go? Wherever the day took you. Down the street to the kid with the new bicycle ramp. Into the woods at the edge of the subdivision that every parent warned you about without any genuine urgency. To the construction site 3 blocks over where a new house was going up, and the unfinished framing made an excellent climbing structure. The construction site was, by any reasonable modern standard, genuinely dangerous. There were exposed nails. There were 2-story drops onto concrete. There were no safety signs, no fences, no liability concerns that in any way addressed the presence of 8-year-olds with nothing to do and infinite time to do it. The foreman, if he was even there, would tell you to get down from there. And the threat in his voice was somewhere between serious and performative. And everyone understood this, including the children. You got down. You climbed something else. The day continued. And here is the detail that captures everything about the 1970s morning departure. If you got hurt badly enough to need stitches, and children in this era regularly did, your parents did not take you to an urgent care facility because urgent care facilities did not exist yet. They took you to the emergency room where they sat with you for 4 hours, and when it was over, they drove you home, and the next morning you went back outside. The stitches came out in 10 days. The construction site was still there. The family car in the 1970s operated under a set of assumptions about child safety that require some historical context to fully appreciate. Seatbelts existed. They were standard equipment in American vehicles from 1968 onward, mandated by federal law. Using them, however, was considered optional, in the way that using a turn signal is currently considered optional. Technically the correct thing to do, but not the kind of thing anyone was going to enforce at the family level. The back seat of a 1970s station wagon on a road trip was a mobile environment of considerable creative freedom. You wrestled. You built elaborate fort structures out of blankets and suitcases. You migrated to the rear cargo area, the flat expanse behind the back seat where 3 children could lay out in relative comfort, and watched the highway receding through the rear window until you fell asleep. The family car was also, in many American households, a significant smoking environment. Both parents in the front seat, windows occasionally cracked. The distinction between indoor and outdoor air, made purely theoretical by the steady production of cigarette smoke in an enclosed space traveling at 65 miles per hour. Nobody complained about this because the vocabulary for complaining about it had not yet fully developed. You breathed what the car contained and arrived at your destination. Here is the part of 1970s childhood that nobody talks about when they talk about 1970s childhood. The television was a parenting tool. Not in the way that parents today describe screens as parenting tools, with accompanying guilt and screen time limits and articles about developmental impact. The 1970s television was a parenting tool in the same uncomplicated way that a park bench is a parenting tool. You put the child near it, and you went and did something else. Saturday morning cartoons were not an entertainment product. They were a scheduled childcare block, running from approximately 7 a.m. to noon, during which the television was responsible for every child in the household, and the parents were responsible for sleeping, drinking coffee, reading the newspaper, and existing as adults in a house that was temporarily not demanding anything from them. Here is something that almost nobody remembers. Until 1978, American children's vitamins were manufactured to taste exactly like candy. Exactly. Not approximately. The flavor, the texture, the shape, all designed to be indistinguishable from actual candy. The 1970s American summer for a child of the suburbs was not a curated experience. There was no summer enrichment program. There was no rotating schedule of structured activities designed to ensure that the 12 weeks between school years were educationally productive. There was the neighborhood. There was the bicycle. There was the public swimming pool, which you rode to by yourself, and where the lifeguards were teenagers doing their best but not operating under the assumption that every child needed continuous monitoring. You got sunburned. Badly. Repeatedly. treated at home with cold water and the quiet understanding that you should probably get out of the sun for a day or two. You drank from garden hoses. You ate food that had been sitting in the sun at the neighborhood cookout. You played in creek beds that were not tested for anything. You came home dirty in ways that required genuine commitment to clean. And then school started again in September, and you had developed, through 12 weeks of unstructured time, a collection of skills that no scheduled activity could have produced. How to negotiate with someone who doesn't want to negotiate. How to manage boredom until it becomes creativity. How to assess risk with no adult available to assess it for you. How to get yourself home. The generation that grew up this way is now in its 50s and 60s. They carry something that is genuinely difficult to cultivate in a more supervised environment. A tolerance for uncertainty. A comfort with improvisation. The knowledge, not the belief, the knowledge that they can figure it out. Because they spent years being required to figure it out with no adult available to do it for them. There is one image that captures the entire decade of 1970s childhood. A screen door. Not the child running through it. Not the parent watching from inside. Just the screen door itself, closing behind a 7-year-old on a Tuesday morning in July. The spring at the top pulling it shut with that specific metallic slap that every person who grew up in the 1970s can still hear in their head. The sound of being trusted with the whole neighborhood and the whole afternoon and no plan at all. The generation that grew up hearing that sound behind them every morning, they turned out fine. Mostly. Whether we would make the same choices today is a different question. But that sound, that particular metallic slap of a screen door closing on a summer morning, is one of the most specific and irreplaceable sounds in American childhood history. And most of the people who remember it would trade a great deal to hear it one more time. Subscribe to Back in Time. Every week, we go back to a version of American life that most people have stopped thinking about. Drop a comment right now and tell me the one thing from your childhood that would be absolutely unacceptable today. Back in Time.